So to give an idea of this story, this happened about a week ago. I've been debating on whether to post this on here or not, and I finally decided to do so. I feel like I need to get it off my chest for peace of mind. For context, I am a 25-year-old woman who is 3 months pregnant. The two people involved in this incident are myself and my brother-in-law, who is 19. For the sake of this story, I'll call him Jack. Now, Jack is a very street smart, and on top of that, a brown belt in some martial art. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I believe, so he definitely knows how to hold his own in any difficult situation. He is the outspoken younger child in his family as compared to my husband's soft demeanor. Being only 2 siblings, my husband and Jack are very close. Jack currently lives with my husband and myself. I live in a small town in California, and the 3 of us live in a small 2-bedroom apartment. It isn't special or anything, but considering how close the 3 of us are and all the fun we have, it's home. The downside is that while we have good neighbors and everything, the neighborhood isn't that good. A lot of gang-related crimes have taken place over the years, and drug abuse is common on the streets. Anyways, onto the story. Now, being pregnant, I had the usual weird cravings, and on that particular night, I was dying for some pickles. Naturally, we didn't have any at our place, so the plan of action was to go and get them at 1 a.m. There is a commercial area about a 25-minute walk from our apartment complex with a huge Walmart. So that is our go-to store for anything we needed. My husband was away on a business trip for the weekend, so Jack was on my beck and call for everything. I told him about my craving, and he got ready to leave right away. Not wanting to stay home alone at that time of night, I decided to go along with him. I figured the fresh air would be good for me, and I felt like I could use a walk, so off we went. It was a bit chilly that night, and naturally, I didn't realize it, so I had to make do in a tank top and yoga pants. That is until Jack gave me his jacket. We had a really pleasant walk all the way to the store, talking about everything and enjoying the walk in general. We got to Walmart around 1:25 to 30 a.m. and spent around half an hour there. Since I frequently visit the store a lot, I am friendly with a few of the employees working there, so I spent some time talking to them as well. I got my pickles and a few other groceries that needed restocking. I also got things off of my maternity checklist. Jack got a few things that he needed, and we said our goodbyes and left. I'll admit I'm very naive, which I think is probably because of my sheltered upbringing. We were at the edge of the parking lot when we crossed a group of 4 greasy guys in their late 20s hanging around. I caught them staring, but since I had just started showing, I didn't make much of it. There weren't many cars around either since it was very late at night. Jack and I started our journey back once again, crackling jokes and messing around with each other. He made a joke about naming my baby after him if I had a son. We were just goofing around. Little did I know how quickly that would change, because only a few minutes into our walk back home, Jack's demeanor suddenly changed. Now, I've known Jack since he was 12, and I've always known him to be very laid back and carefree. His breathing became very erratic, he was laughing way too loud at anything I was saying, and he was twirling around like he was dancing every few seconds. I thought he was just messing around with me because I'm a dance instructor, but something just wasn't right with the way he was acting. He started laughing all of a sudden and said, "I dare you to shuffle sideways across the road to the other sidewalk." I thought this was very weird, but since I was in a good mood, I thought, why not, and just went for it. Jack followed right next to me doing a weird dance, which didn't really make any sense. I started laughing at him when we started walking again, on the other side of the road this time. Any signs of discomfort he was showing earlier had all disappeared, so I figured he only wanted to make our tedious walk home entertaining. Okay, now back to our side of the road. I looked at him weirdly, and he had this wide grin on his face. Once again, I couldn't say no to him, so we did the same thing back. We were both laughing like crazy, and I was in an even better mood than earlier. This time, however, I noticed that the same group of 4 guys walking about 30 yards behind us. I thought it was a bit strange, but didn't think of it as being too strange. Maybe they were going home too, I thought. About 10 minutes had passed since we left Walmart, and we had arrived near a residential area. Not apartment buildings, but typical California homes with large backyards, etc. This particular residential area was to our left, and for our apartment, we had to go straight for at least another 2 blocks. Now, this is where it starts to get creepy and straight up terrifying. Instead of going straight like we were supposed to, Jack challenged me to a race. We'd turn left on the end of the block, run that length of houses, and come back. This was very strange. He was adamant about it, but there was something different this time. He still had that weird laugh going on, but his eyes told a different story. He looked desperate, as if he really wanted me to say yes. I noticed those guys were still strolling behind us, which at that point were alarm bells in my head. I agreed to the race, and he gave me a head start. I could see those guys staring at us out of the corner of my eye. They just stopped and were simply looking in our direction, making me feel very uneasy. Jack made a big show of counting down from 3, and we took off. Literally 5 seconds into our race, once we were out of sight, Jack put his hand over my mouth and dragged me to the house on our left and into the bushes. I was about to scold him for cheating when he hissed at me that we were being followed. The terrified look on his face was all I needed to see to know he was right. I felt my heart sink down into my stomach. I could feel myself throwing up at any second, and I had tears welling up. There was no time for any of that though, because we heard voices almost instantly. Jack pushed me further under the bushes and he positioned right next to me, both of us pretty concealed by now. Sure enough, all 4 of them had turned left onto the street and they just stood there looking around. The streetlights were fairly dim, so it was pretty dark. One of them said, "I didn't know knocked up bitches could run this fast." Another guy mentioned something about how he thought the kid was onto them. What he said next sent shivers up my spine. "I've got a knife here for that bitch. She can't resist what I say with a knife on her throat. We'll dump the kid somewhere. Don't worry about that piece of shit." I could feel my throat closing up. It got difficult to breathe by the second. But it wasn't over yet. Their leader decided to look around for us. They split up and 2 of them came in our direction. My heart came up all the way to my throat as I literally froze. The fear of getting caught was like ice running through my veins. One of them came up and stood right next to where we were hiding and started smoking a cigarette. The other 3 were nearby and they started going through the neighborhood looking for us. I was sure that the guy closest to us would find us as he was only a few steps away. Jack turned to look at me and I could see the fear on his face. He raised his finger to his mouth, signaling me to be extra quiet. The smoker guy was pacing around us slowly. Luckily, it was dark, so that played to our advantage. After what seemed like an eternity, but was actually 30 minutes, they regrouped in the middle. One of them made a call, telling someone to bring their car around. Another 5 minutes had gone by when the car finally arrived, and the men, all looking pissed off, finally drove off. It was too dark to clearly get the number plate, but I made a mental note of the model and color of the car. We waited a while before getting out from the bushes and brushed ourselves off. I couldn't hold it in any longer and I bursted into tears. Jack too, with glistening eyes. He hugged me, but he didn't for long. He wanted to get home as quickly as possible before those men had any chance of coming back. We got our grocery bags, which were all muddy now, and made our way back home. I felt like they would pull up behind us any second, but luckily, we made it back without any further issues. I collapsed on the couch the minute we entered and double-checked the locks. I was sobbing my eyes out and trying not to throw up. Jack was trying to keep it together, but I felt like he would start crying any minute as well. I honestly felt so stupid and ashamed. Here I was, 6 years older than my brother-in-law, who looks at me as the older sister he never had. And he was the one consoling me. We stayed that way for a while when he told me to get some rest. It was almost 3 a.m. I didn't have the mental capacity to do anything else. So I just went to my room and passed out on the bed. I had a load of missed calls when I woke up from my husband. Jack had called him and told him what had happened. He told me he would be coming back that very day, which I was very happy about. I also told Jack how grateful I was for him being with me. We have since tried to move on from the real-life nightmare, but I still feel like something is bothering me. My apartment is on the 4th floor and has a clear view of the road outside. Now, I don't know if it's my mind playing tricks on me, but I'm fairly certain I've seen those guys coming and hanging around the apartment complex at night. I've also seen them driving slowly around in what I'm sure is the same car I saw that night. I have never feared for my life or felt in any sort of danger the way I have these past few days. We filed a police report, but we haven't heard anything so far. So that's my story, guys. I'll keep you updated, I guess, if anything else comes up, and I could really use some suggestions as to what I should do next. What terrifies me is the fact that if I had gone alone that night, or if Jack didn't feel like going, I would probably have been assaulted or worse, and nobody would have even known what happened. To the creepy stalker guys, let's not meet. I was a stubborn and precocious teen. At age 15, I had a lot of friends, but I was a bit of a loner and enjoyed long walks in nature. I enjoyed very long walks, like sometimes over 10 miles. Since I couldn't drive yet, I would often just take off from my house and walk on back roads all day long. This was before smartphones. As I was a 100-pound, very tiny girl, my parents shouldn't have allowed it, but they have always been very relaxed in their parenting. But like I said, I was stubborn. I also had an unhealthy attitude of invulnerability. On these walks, people would often pull over and ask me if I needed a ride. The vast majority were men. I never said yes. Usually, I would respond politely with, "No thank you, I'm on a walk," and they would leave me alone. Maybe after an "are you sure?" and a concerned look at most. This happened literally hundreds of times without incident. However, there is one time that I got a bit lost while walking. Not severely lost, as I could have easily backtracked the last 5 or 6 miles home, but I had taken a wrong turn and wandered into a very rural area that I had not expected to be in. Whatever, it was a nice day, so I kept walking. A guy in his early 30s in a bit of a junky car passed by and asked if I needed a ride, as per usual. I politely declined and he drove on. I got creepy vibes, but I didn't think much of it. Then 10 minutes later, he pulled up behind me again. This was a very rural road, and he must have driven it in a very large loop to come up behind me again, miles out of the way. He slowly started driving alongside me while I walked and started asking personal questions. He asked for my name, my age, where I lived. I did not tell the truth. He also repeatedly tried to get me into his car. I was very uncomfortable and just wanted him to go away, but was too afraid to be rude. However, I was not getting into his car. After an excruciating 5 minutes or so of this, another car came and he was forced to drive off again. I was more annoyed than scared at this point. That good old invulnerable attitude. Then like clockwork, 10 minutes later, to my horror, I see that car again. This time, he doesn't drive alongside me, but parks in a pullout a few feet ahead. I don't know what came over me, but instead of panicking, my brain just shut down and I just disassociated. I decided to just ignore him. I walked by the car calmly, continuing my walk. I tried not to look at him, but I stole a glance. He was pointing something at me. It was a gun. Before I had time to react or even think, a motorcycle pulled up behind us and parked. My stalker seemed extremely panicked by this and peeled out as quickly as possible. I must have looked freaked out because the motorcyclist, who looked like a dad type, was concerned. He asked me if I was okay and if I needed a ride. I gave my usual, "No thank you, I'm on a walk," and he drove off. I was feeling pretty distrusting at that point, and aside from that, I didn't want to climb onto a motorcycle with anyone, even though he had saved me from something potentially very bad. Looking back, I owe quite a lot to him. I'm not sure what compelled him to stop, but thank goodness he did. I then ran the long distance home, looking over my shoulder the whole way. I never saw the man again, and I didn't tell my parents because I was afraid of them restricting my freedom. I still took my long walks, but not again in that area, until a popular nature reserve was opened there years later. To the creepy guy who really wanted me to get into his car, let's not meet. This happened to me when I was 21 after an overdose suicide attempt. I woke up in the hospital in the middle of the night to a nurse saying he needed to replace my IV. He jabs me 2 or 3 times, but doesn't hit a vein, so I ask if he could get someone else to try. He says no and keeps going. As he is doing this, he is pushing and wiggling the needles around under my skin, saying he is trying to get to the vein. By the 7th or 8th needle, it registers that he is intentionally trying to hurt me. I ask him, "Why are you doing this?" He just says, "It's your own fault you're here." I was too weak to fight back, and it was in the middle of the night. There was no one else around I could call out to. I have no idea how many times he ended up puncturing me in the end. The next day, a different nurse was taking out my IV. She was horrified because she said it was the biggest needle she'd ever seen used on a living patient. A lot of people shrug this off when I tell them about it, but it was so terrifying being alone, helpless, and knowing that the person who was supposed to care for you hated you and wanted to cause you pain. So yeah, night nurse who loves huge needles and hates mentally ill girls, let's not meet again. This happened a couple years ago when I was a senior in high school living in Southern California. It was later in the evening, sometime between 8 to 8:30, and my mom and I had just gotten home from a long day of driving and visiting family to discover that our cat was completely out of food. I was tired of being in the car by then and did not want to go to Petco to get cat food. My mom begged me to go with her, so I finally caved in and said yes. Looking back now, I am so grateful that I did, because if I hadn't decided to go, I think there would be a good chance my mom would have never came home. Another important detail I want to mention is that the windows on the car my mom had were extremely tinted, making it pretty much impossible to see into the car. So we pull into the parking lot of Petco, and I look around and notice there's only a few other cars, with one parked a few rows to the back of us. My mom says I can wait in the car since she's just going in real quick to pick up some food. A minute after my mom walks out of the car and is halfway to the store, the car that was parked a few rows back pulls up in the spot right next to our car on the passenger side. I think it's a little strange, but then think maybe the person wanted a closer spot to the store. A man steps out of the car and gets his big German Shepherd out of the back of his car and walks into the store. I'm looking inside the store and notice this guy is watching my mom and following her around, but not enough for her to notice. He gets ahead of her in line, and after he checks out, he stands outside the entrance and is watching her check out. My mom walks out of the store and the guy starts walking behind her. At this point, I'm starting to get a really bad feeling and I'm very creeped out. When my mom makes it back to our car, she opens the back to put the cat food in, and the guy opens the back of his car, which is right next to ours, and he starts talking to her and motioning for her to come look at something in the back of his car. His hand starts to move towards his waist, and I immediately start yelling for her to get into our car right now. The guy looks super shocked, as I'm guessing he never saw me in the car, and stops talking to her. My mom looks very confused, but after I yell at her some more to get into the car, she finally does. The creepy guy immediately gets into his car and drives off in a hurry. When my mom gets into the car, I ask her what that guy was saying to her, and she tells me he was telling her to look at something he got for his dog in the back of his car. I tell her everything I observed, and I'm pretty sure he was trying to abduct her. Creepy Petco guy, let's not meet ever again. So this is the end of the video. I just want to thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And if you want more story narrations, feel free to subscribe. So I have something to tell you guys, and I'm not going to mention this in any other video. I'm just going to act like everything's totally fine. But I live in Florida and the AC currently does not work right now. So I have to use a fan for now, and I'm sitting here hours a day without a fan, sweating just to make sure that the audio quality for my narrations are good. And I would use the fan during recording sessions, but I really can't because it would make the audio quality just sound like complete shit. I know, first world problems, but this is a really long video. I don't have a team or anything. I just do this by myself. And when this channel is able to be monetized, I won't gain anything from this video because I didn't censor any words. Like words from the hospital story I just told and a few other words, I didn't censor it to keep the realness of the story. So if you appreciate my daily uploads and efforts and my suffering in Florida, consider supporting me on Patreon for $1 a month. And you can cancel anytime. It's patreon.com/pictochatbaby. Bye!